Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Indonesian President Joko Widodo witnessed the signing of agreements at their leaders' retreat in Bintan. Investigators are spotted at a canal in Upper Bukit Timah where 11-year-old twin boys were found dead last Friday. And in part 2 of our series on home renovation, the do's and don'ts when buying big household items. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Singapore and Indonesia have signed a set of agreements addressing long-standing bilateral issues on flight information region, defence cooperation and extradition of fugitives. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Indonesia President Joko Widodo witnessed the signings during their 5th Leaders' Retreat in Bintan this afternoon. They also presided over an exchange of letters undertaking to bring the agreements into force simultaneously.
What remains will be for both countries to complete our domestic processes to ratify and bring the set of agreements into force. The conclusion of these agreements demonstrates the strength and maturity of Singapore-Indonesia relations. These agreements take into account both parties' interests, represent a good balance of benefits, and are durable agreements for the long haul, designed to last for at least a generation, and create a solid foundation to move bilateral relations forward with confidence and trust.
With more is the Straits Times Singapore editor Zakir Hussain. Zakir, what is the significance of the 3 agreements signed today and how are they in Singapore's interests?
So I think the 3 agreements cover areas that, I wouldn't say they've been a bone of contention, but they've cropped up from time to time and in some instances created tensions between both sides. So I think the 3 agreements seen together really address long-standing issues in a constructive way. I think both sides this time see that their interests are taken into account and, as Prime Minister Lee described, represent a good balance of benefits. There are also durable agreements for the long haul that will last for at least a generation. And they also allow both countries to move bilateral relations forward with greater confidence. If I were to go into each of the agreements in some detail, I think the Flight Information Region Agreement really realigns what we call FIR, or pockets of airspace, which have been managed by Singapore for some time. As aviation in the region rises and so on, Indonesia's for some time been expressing its desire to manage its airspace, especially over its Natuna Islands in the South China Sea. So the realignment of the boundaries will shift the FIR boundary between the 2 countries, but at the same time, the agreement delegates to Singapore, to Changi really, significant portions of the space below 37,000 feet, which is required for the smooth and safe and efficient functioning of civil aviation. So in a way, it almost guarantees Changi's continued growth for the next 25 years or so, but at the same time allows Indonesian aviation to develop in that time frame. The other agreements, I think the extradition treaty is something Indonesia's also been wanting for some time, and it really steps up cooperation between both sides in combating a range of crimes. It sends a clear signal to investors. And really it's part of a step towards a wider region-wide ASEAN extradition treaty. Again, the statement on the Defence Cooperation Agreement, the deal was signed in 2007. It really will strengthen cooperation between both armed forces. And I think there's hopes are high on both sides. That the deals will be approved in good time.
On top of the 3 agreements signed today, Zakir, I understand that there were other areas as well that were discussed. What were they?
So I think the leaders discussed a range of areas. One key issue on, I think, the minds of some was the resumption of travel between both countries, which has been quite severely disrupted due to COVID-19. And I think Prime Minister Lee and President Joko expressed hope that the Batam-Bintan travel bubble, which is right now unilateral for Singaporeans going there, would in good time be bi-directional, so that Singaporeans and visitors from Singapore who go over to Batam and Bintan can then perhaps have a VTL-like treatment when they return, making it more efficient and smoother for them to travel. There are also a range of other MOUs which were signed before or elsewhere, but around the same time as the retreat, and these touch on areas of cooperation like the green economy and sustainability. It's an area both countries are keen on, in financial cooperation, in energy cooperation, as well as in education and human capital development. And I think one of the things that these provide for is greater exchanges between schools and universities on both sides, as well as a good number of internships for Singapore undergrads, as well as recent grads, to intern at companies in Indonesia for say half a year or so, as well as for Indonesian grads or undergrads to intern at companies in Singapore. I think travel between both countries was quite significant before COVID-19, and I think the hopes are high that as both countries move to living with the virus and recovering from the pandemic, some of these ties can resume fairly smoothly.
Well, thank you so much, Zakir, for the sharing. Singapore editor at the Straits Times, Zakir Hussain. Meanwhile, PM Lee says Singapore will discuss with Indonesia how it can make the new Bintan and Batam travel bubble a two-way one, hopefully without taking too long. Indonesia yesterday announced the launch of the travel bubble to its two popular islands. PM Lee also says that both leaders agreed that their countries should continue discussions to expand travel to other parts of Indonesia.
President Joko and I agreed to continue discussions also to expand air and sea travel more generally to more destinations in Indonesia. But we have to take into account the COVID situation and in particular the outbreak of the Omicron variant, and we will do so at a pace that both sides are comfortable with, taking into account our respective public health situations.
Investigators have been spotted at a canal in Upper Bukit Timah where the 11-year-old twin boys were found dead last Friday. Two officers in plain clothes seen walking around the area for about 10 minutes this afternoon. They are believed to be looking for possible entry points into the area as well as the canal. The father of the twins, who was charged with the murder of one of the boys yesterday, is expected to visit the site later on. The police prosecutor had asked for him to be remanded for 1 week with permission to be taken out for investigations, including scene visits. In a surprise move this morning, the Monetary Authority of Singapore further tightened its monetary policy to help strengthen the dollar and keep inflation down. MAS raising slightly the slope or rate of appreciation of its Singapore dollar policy band. A stronger currency lowers the cost of imports, which Singapore is highly dependent on. The move comes a day after data showed inflation climbing to 4% in December, the highest in nearly 9 years. Let's bring in UOB economist Barnabas Gan. Barnabas, MAS's monetary policy stance is typically announced every 6 months, in April and October. An unusual off-cycle move today. Could you expound on the significance of it?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. I think what's important to note really is that the last off-cycle meeting that was done by the MAS was on the 30th of March 2020. And back then, it was really in response to the lower than expected core inflation amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. I think what is important to note is that the off-cycle meeting that has happened, it's really likely in response to the higher than expected inflation pressures that has been seen in Singapore. Do note that December's inflation is at 4%, headline inflation is at 4%, while core inflation has actually passed its 2% handle in December last year.
And today's announcement, Barnabas, is the second round of tightening in 3 months. Do you reckon it will be enough to keep inflation in check?
Well, I guess that it's important to note that there is upside risk to inflation given the impact of most of the pandemic-related and geopolitical shocks on the global supply chains, at least for the year ahead. And really, really for the first half of 2022, what we do expect is that it's for headline inflation for Singapore to actually stay above the 3% handle, before easing to the 2% range towards the end of this year. And this basically suggests that inflation pressures will likely stay above trend, at least in the first half of this year. Although core inflation is still expected to stay above the 2% handle for the whole of 2022. But I think what's important to note is that headline inflation is likely to actually decelerate into the second half, and what we do look for really is for headline inflation to actually average at 3% for 2022. So this basically means that the off-cycle, more so the off-cycle decision by the MES to actually tighten monetary policy today will likely be really in response to the higher inflation, and that would mean that they are trying to keep the inflation pressures in check, at least for the later half of this year.
That's it, Barnabas. Help us to understand why is it important to keep inflation in check and not let it skyrocket or go too high up?
Well, I guess that really from the economics point of view, some level of inflation is necessary when it comes to the running of the economy. But a runaway inflation, or from how you put it, a skyrocket inflation, it's really detrimental to the inflation, to more so to the economy, simply because it does actually deteriorate or more so ruin consumer spending power given inflation. So basically it means that the $1 today may actually be valued way lesser compared if inflation is allowed to run uncontrolled. So this is really very much a mandate of central banks, not only in Singapore, but I believe across the world, to actually keep and avoid skyrocketing inflation for their own respective economies.
Barnabas, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Economist at UOB, Barnabas Gan. In other local news, visitor arrivals to Singapore sunk to a historic low with a drop of more than 80% from 2020. Tourism receipts tumbled by more than half to an estimated $1.9 billion. There's been year-on-year growth, though, in the last 3 quarters. Singaporeans could soon take a cruise to nearby countries this year, as the Singapore Tourism Board is in talks with authorities in ASEAN harmonizing about safety protocols. STB says there have been no COVID-19 clusters on cruise ships to date, although 5 positive cases have been detected across the 2 cruise lines offering cruises to nowhere. YouTuber Dekosh is expected to plead guilty, a district court heard today. He's accused of multiple offences, including offering cash to boys below 18 for sexual services, and was handed 7 charges in August last year. His case is adjourned to March 10th. Imagine this. You've bought your dream home, spent thousands of dollars renovating it, and now you need to furnish it. In the second part of our series on home renovations, we'll be discussing how to shop smart to save money, especially when buying big household items. Do you splurge on a state-of-the-art fridge, or will a basic one do? Following a few simple steps will help, and once again, we've got just the person to help us out. I'm pleased to welcome Invest editor Tan Wee Boon to the show. Wee Boon, when it comes to big-ticket items, I suppose impulse buying is the absolutely wrong thing to do.
You are actually spot on there. Buying on impulse is a big no-no for everything, even when it comes to your shopping. You should know that financial planning is not just about investing and saving. It's also about being smart in spending, especially when you need to buy the big household items for your home. For a start, you need to know what products are most suitable for your family and where you should buy them. My advice is if you're looking for electrical items, go to a reputable store because you can get most things there under one roof. Yes, you can shop online these days, but what people forget is when you buy online, no one is going to explain to you how to operate these items properly. The worst part is many of the good tips can only come from experienced salesmen, and these are not found in the instruction manuals. Also, you don't enjoy reading instruction manuals too, right? It is also cheaper to shop at the store because if you look at the various ads that appear in the Straits Times daily, many shops actually offer good discounts as well as free gifts that are not available to those who shop online. You may not believe this, but some of these discounts are actually better than the staff discounts for electrical company employees. And if you're not picky, you can also buy the store's display set, which are also much cheaper. For sure, you won't be able to find such deals online.
Wibun, say I need to buy a new fridge and a washing machine for my newly renovated house. What factors should I consider before making a decision?
That's actually a very good question. You just renovated your home, right? So the first thing to do is to measure the space available in your new kitchen and yard. In this case, the centimeters are more important than your dollars and cents. With the measurement, go to the store and look for the suitable items that will fit this space. And please don't shop online for these items. Why is this important? If you order items with the wrong dimension and you find that it cannot fit nicely because it's either too big or too small, you may have to pay a penalty that is up to 30% of the price that you originally ordered just for an exchange. Say you buy a $3,000 fridge and you got it wrong. What it means is that you lose $900 just to ship it back because once opened, the dealer have to treat it as a used item. Even if you are confident with your measuring skills and you double check the specs, there is still something that you wouldn't know, such as do you have enough space for the door to open properly so that you don't get stuck in such situations. Here are two more incentives for you to go to the store. You may be surprised that the store actually offer a surprise discount because they are clearing older stock to make way for new ones. Or you may just spot another model in the store that is better than the one that you want to buy. This is what financial planning is about. You compare products before you invest your money so that you get the best deal.
Wibun, great tips from you as always. That was Invest Editor Tan Wibun. We have more tips online and you can follow Wibun's articles at str.sg/invest. Remember, financial planning is not just about investing and saving, but it's also about being smart with spending. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Hsien. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.